So what I actually do want to talk about, that I've understood, is that I was not physically ill per se. What I was definitely was emotionally unwell. I wasn't depressed. It wasn't a chemical imbalance that came upon me. It was very much circumstantial, and circumstances just building up and building up over time, and to such a degree, and to find no empathetic or sympathetic person really as such, or anyone who even understood what I was necessarily going through, had created a lot, like such tremendous dysregulation and dissatisfaction within myself about everything. I didn't know that I was supposed to like myself. I think I translated everything in the modern way, which is, if people don't like you and people don't give you worth and value, then you are valueless. Now, I understand that some people can say, well, maybe people don't like you for a reason, and you're living in Delulu land and you're delusional and stuff. And honestly, I understand that way of thinking, because that is how I operated for such a long time, because I thought that, well, people can't be delusional, so there must be something wrong with me. And then I flipped the narrative and I said, people can be wrong, and perhaps there is something right with me and they just can't see it. Because I was trying to be nice and kind to everyone to the best of my efforts. And I also very much believe that we are not saints, and even perhaps saints sometimes were a villain in someone else's life, and that's the yin and yang, right? Someone else's saint is someone else's villain per se. I may play an angelic role in your life, but I may also for you be the villain. It depends on your life and where you're going through, and how my personality affects you or reacts with you, whether you see my kindness as just simply what it is, me being nice to you, or you from your own perspective may think that this is some sort of manipulation, I'm trying to get something, I'm trying to whatever. The big takeaway that I really had also was that we so much look at the world through our perspective. Our perspective is like our glasses. My number is different. Everyone's number is a little bit different. Sometimes numbers are the same, and then that's your spectacle family. But I need these glasses in order to see the world. So these glasses make the world clear for me, in the same way I think people wear emotional glasses, mental glasses, and that's what we call perspective. And then we look at the world through that perspective, through those glasses. If someone's emotional glasses are a bit dim or dull or murky or more full of hate, because that's the number that they've been attuned to, then that's how they're going to look at the world. They're going to be wary about the world. They're going to be scared. And wariness really is just a form of being scared of being taken advantage of, being taken for a ride, being taken for a fool, being used or abused. And again, that's the calibration that has happened to those emotions. And very much because I had that happen to me to such great levels, consistently, I was scared in many respects, and that fright was really poisoning me also, and I was tremendously and emotionally unwell. And there was something to it. I don't want to to furnish the thought that I was just imagining it, and people were not being mean to me, and people were not being unkind to me, and I wasn't being excluded from things, and I wasn't literally having people laugh at me. I mean, I've been in drawing rooms where groups of women would point at me and just laugh at me, and you sit there trying to ignore them. Because what are you supposed to say? You're supposed to say, well, why are you laughing at me? Why are you being mean to me? As an adult, you feel a bit silly even thinking that, and you don't want to be affected, but of course you're affected. Laughter, mean laughter, and unkind laughter is still energy, vibration coming to you. You can hear it. You can hear it when people whisper and they're looking at you and they're whispering, and that affects you too physiologically. So all these things put together was not very good for me emotionally, and finally I became so severely poisoned that I was all over the place. And a lot of my journey really is about understanding what had happened, not even why things had happened, because I can't be in someone else's head. I can't be in a culture's a person's head or a culture's head and say, well, why did you do that? Why did you mistreat me? Why didn't you respect me? Why didn't you want to be friends with me? You can't force friendships. You can't force loyalty any more than you have caused that betrayal, per se. So my issue was not why have they done this to me, but it was more very practical and sensible, which is this has been done to me, and now I've been pushed off a cliff, and I have miraculously found a footfall. And how do I find a firmer foothold? And how do I now learn to climb myself out of this crevice, this place that I've been pushed into? How do I climb out of it? And it was long and arduous, and oftentimes I did slip and I did keep falling. Sometimes, that snakes and ladders game where you you arrive on a snake head and then you go all the way back down again. And that's what was happening in many respects. I'd find a foothold and then I'd slip, and then it would be shaky and I wouldn't hold it firm enough maybe, or it would not be on solid ground, and I'd fall all the way back down again. And it was and find myself, as I say, at rock bottom, and then having to climb again. And then I'd look for a different route, because clearly this route was going to take me to this rocky place where I would fall again. So then I'm looking for alternate routes, alternate footfalls, and this took years and years, because I kept falling. Sometimes I'd fall so much further than when I'd originally fallen. And so a lot of the journey, a lot of the process was trying to figure out how I can get myself to some sort of land again, some sort of equilibrium, emotional equilibrium. In physical terms, it would be, how can I, if you've broken a leg, how can I get back to walking? How can I teach myself to walk or to talk? If you have some motor and neurological issues, how do I get back to that? And for me, emotionally, it was, how do I get back to some sort of equilibrium where I don't feel unsafe anymore? Unsafe, not just circumstantially, but also unsafe by my own reactions to things. I didn't want to have triggers where I'm just crying. I didn't want to immediately go from 1 to 10 and start screaming. And again, the first thing I did was I stopped blaming myself. It was not my fault. If you as a child, if you as anyone keeps being confronted by animals that are threatening to bite you or hurt you or eat you, you are going to develop a physiological reaction to even the sound of those animals from far away. And by animals, I also mean human beings, who their whispers, or the way they look, or their tone of voice, or clusters of so-called friends, frenemies, fake families, however you want to term them, and learning to remain safe and secure within yourself, learning safety and security of how to deal with the world is something that most of us are not taught. And unfortunately, if some of us come from backgrounds or journeys where we've met with more hardships, met with more ugliness than we have with soft ships and beauties, then it's something that we have to teach ourselves. I think now we hear more and more people sharing their journeys, talking about their emotional journeys and how they've healed themselves. The code word seems to be healing. I don't necessarily, I think even with healing, you're still, you break a bone, and even though you heal it, even if you get it operated on, there's always going to be a little, you'll feel a slight twinge sometimes. And I think it's the same with emotions. You may not be 100%, because it's not a blank slate. Nothing is ever that blank slate, but you can come close to being a blank slate, or putting yourself back into equilibrium. And that was very, very important to me once I realized how much out of how discombobulated a state I was in emotionally, how unhappy I was, how upset I was all the time, how I kept asking, why are they doing this to me? Why are they treating me like this? Why aren't they, why do they not like me? And finally, like I said, I flipped the switch and I was like, I don't care. I don't care if people don't like me. I don't care if women just look at me without even knowing me and suddenly decide to be mean-spirited and say rude things to me. Or start picking me apart, things like, oh, you're not, oh, so-and-so said you were really pretty, and you're not that pretty. Oh, you're not that tall, I'm taller than you. Oh, you're not petite, you're big. Oftentimes the attacks would always be physical. They'd always be physical in nature, because being mean about people's physical attributes is one of the easiest things to do. Another thing people would call me always was, oh, you're so manly. And I think it came because I was always very opinionated, and I was always very, and I'm not a petite person. I am, I'm a medium build, large build, whatever you want to call my build, but it's certainly not petite. So I was always called very manly, and it was not said as a good thing. It was always said as less attractive and not whatever, but my mind somehow found it very attractive. I was like, oh. So even though these particular groups of people, teachers, what have you, think that having an opinion in class or in society or otherwise is some manly trait, men are obviously rewarded for this trait. So me having this trait must somewhere be a good thing because I'm speaking up and have an opinion. And even though these groups of people would like to downplay it, I'm going to take it as something good. And that's where I slowly realized that that's what happens. My perspective of something not being, I didn't want to see my opinion being opinionated as a bad thing, and so it became a good thing for me. Same way that, for the longest time I did struggle with my shoulders and with the girth of my shoulders. I was always like, oh, I'm not petite, I don't have these frail, dainty little shoulders, and I'm not feminine enough, and I'm not, because I'm not small and I can't be carried off easily, in order to carry me off, it's not an easy thing. And then I slowly started turning that around. I was like, we're all born with our genetics, with our body types. I'm a stout person. To be called stout in a world where tall and willowy is considered, the beauty standard. I learned to love my stoutness. I learned to love looking like a portobello mushroom. I learned to appreciate my girth and my going up in the world. I didn't need to be dainty to feel like I liked what I looked like. When I looked in the mirror, and now when I see my broad shoulders, when I see my thickness and my, when I see my propensity towards not being dainty and not being petite and not being all that stuff, which I was told was the beauty standard that all women must fit, and for which I did struggle for a while and realized I'm not going to do that anymore. I don't want to. I don't care for it. I don't, even if I care for it, it's not important to me. I actually don't. I not just did not learn not to care for it. I learned that I did not actually care for it, that I was very happy with what I looked like, with my shoulders. I learned to, I have big arms. I do not have long willowy arms. I have big arms, and I would often hear people saying, why are you wearing sleeveless and you're showing your arms and you've got flab and everything? And I started to say, I very early on was one of those people who said, so what? So I'm not supposed to wear, it's hot. I want to wear a tank top. I want to wear something sleeveless. I live in a tropical climate. It's the summer, it's hot. I'm not supposed to wear this because your eyes, your sensibility somehow being offended because my upper arms are not long and slim enough to please you. So therefore I should not dress this way. Go away. Please just go away. And stop trying to make me feel bad or trying to control me through beauty aesthetics or looks aesthetics. And I just always had this thing where I would push back, and then of course I'd be called opinionated, I'd be called manly, mud, and all sorts of nonsense, trying to label me and trying to put me down in through what because of who I was, which did not sit well with other people. And I began to sit very well with myself. I began to sit comfortably. I began to sit up. I began to be okay with who I was, but still I was emotionally troubled for a very long time with things that just kept happening in my life, with triggers all around. And like I said, even a voice from childhood can be a trigger. A group of friends can be a trigger. Scent can be a trigger. Someone's name can be a trigger. There's so many triggers in the world. And by triggers, I don't mean one has to start crying and, whatnot, but just becoming dysregulated, a slight twinge somewhere and you're dysregulated, but that's okay. I call it emotional stubbing of one's toe, of one's feeling. If you're going to walk through rocky terrain, or even if you're walking through smooth terrain and you come across a bump in the road, you then recalibrate. And the same with emotions. There will be triggers always all around us, but how we get back to equilibrium is our journey towards peace and towards finding really happiness within ourselves. Once we're happy, and we don't have that, by happy I don't mean dancing and throwing balloons up in the air 24 hours a day, but what I do mean is being able to, when you're unhappy, come back to a state of being content and being at peace much faster than not. That's what I mean by being happy. And I found my way. I found a path. I found several paths. I walked them. I slipped. I got up. I walked on. And I hope for the rest of my life, however much life I have to live on planet Earth, I continue to be able to walk paths which are less painful, where I slip less, where I stub my emotional toes less, and those are paths that I'm going to choose. Definitely, for sure, now that I know that I do have a choice to choose those paths. And I hope my journey will be helpful to you in any way, shape and form. Whether you take a lot from it, whether you take a little bit from it, I hope I'm able to contribute onto your own paths of walking towards peacefulness and contentment.